Hello, everyone. We are so excited to be hosting our first PKO, pastorskids.org Parent Summit. My name is Krissie Glass. If you don't know me, I am the PK Ministry Director and a faith-based counselor for pastorskids.org and Care for Pastors. And pastorskids.org is a ministry of Care for Pastors, and we offer faith-based counseling and resources for the entire pastoral family. And this includes counseling for pastors' kids age 14 through 25. And this Parent Summit is just a tool for ministry families to encourage the home, but also help equip parents in how to encourage your children, how to understand how to battle the challenges that your children are facing. And today we have the highly esteemed and experienced Dan Pinkerton. He is a counselor with Care for Pastors, and you can read his bio on our website at careforpastors.org. But thank you, Dan, for doing this and for being willing just to share with our parents and ministry families. And today we are talking about building resilience, creating resilience in your children so that they can really know biblical truth and how to act that out and how to make decisions based on that in a very confusing culture that pushes them away from scriptural truth. And so as we open this up, Dan, I just want to ask this question, and then I'm going to give the floor to you. But why do you feel that resiliency is an important topic, not only for parents in general to teach their children, to model for their children, teens, young adults, but specifically for parents who are in ministry?
It's probably the whole presentation. We'll be covering that as we go through. I've been a counselor or pastor for the last 41 years. And in that time, almost everything I've done is youth oriented. In that time, I was 17 years with middle school. I love the developmental age of middle schoolers. I am a parent, I'm a grandparent, and I will continue to be a parent and grandparent. And what I have found through all of this time is we no longer give our children the skills they need to be resilient in the sense that we don't teach them how to think for themselves. We live in a world that basically tells them what to do. And as I go through this, I'll give examples of that. And we do that too. I've had to ask forgiveness from my kids many times when I haven't given them the latitude they needed to think for themselves. So that's why I kind of put this together and working with Care for Pastors and pastors' kids uniquely, they are held to a standard that sometimes is unrealistic. And
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, I was a pastor, my kids were teenagers. I took on the blame for their actions rather than saying, look, they're a teenager. They're going to make mistakes. You got to love them anyways. I love my child. The behavior I don't like, but I love my child. And sometimes in the pastor's family, at least I'll speak for myself, I found myself being embarrassed as my teenagers were being teenagers. And once I moved from pastorate into full-time counseling and ministry counseling, I had to come back to my kids and apologize to them and say, look, guys,
Wow.
it was me, not you. And so that's why this is so critical to me. This is why I love working with the pastoral teens, primarily the boys. But I say that jokingly because you, Chrissy, you carry most of the girls' load. And so
No,
as I
I'm
go through
thankful.
this, yeah, as I go through this for the parents, it's gonna go quick in one sense. And I'm gonna go through an overview of why I put this together. I'm then gonna go through a quick look at three key things parents can do. Now, one of the questions I think that most parents have is when is it too late? And I'll be very blunt, never. You're
Mhm.
never not a parent, so it's never too late. You can choose to change.
I just think in that introduction there, you said so many powerful things that a lot of our parents need to hear. A lot of our PKs need to hear as a PK, as a pastor's wife. The statement of coming back to your children and admitting mistakes, but also sharing the responsibility you feel as a parent, but also a parent in ministry, but being real about it and having those open conversations. I love that you shared that. And hopefully, parents who watch this will already be encouraged by your intro. So I'm going to let you have the floor, and I'm excited to hear what you had to share. So thank you, Dan.
So let's dive into the information. Okay, as a parent, as infants, the parent and guardian is seen as the primary provider for all the baby's needs. It's usually a little easier when they're a baby because you know that they can't do anything for themselves. So when they cry, you either feed them or you call your spouse to change the dirty diapers, whichever. Or if you need to cuddle them and just give them some joy and love. All as it should be. So the child connects crying with care and survival. This is as it should be. But as they grow up, you instinctively tell them, okay, you need to start using your words. And we as parents hope that their first words, depending if you're the mom or the dad, is either mommy or daddy. There's a competition there. But the unique thing is, one of the first words they learn after mommy and daddy is no. Once they learn this magic word, when they're starting to walk and talk, your parenting skills are going to be tested to the max. They start to talk back. And the next word they learn is why. Oh boy, get ready. Here it comes. This is where the playbook goes off track. As they enter into the teen years, they begin to push back on all rules and requirements established in your house. Don't panic. Don't panic. This is as it should be. This is normal. This is where children are learning how far they can push the bubble. However, there is one universal rule in this. You, as a parent, are the one that has to be consistent. They don't know what that is yet. And until you become consistent and give them a boundary of structure, they are lost. Okay. This is usually where we as parents start to lose the battle. Examples are you've had a really miserable day at work. You and your spouse maybe had an argument just a few minutes later. Maybe you got some bad news and your emotional level is at the extreme. You don't have another inch to go. And then your child does something childish. What do you do? All right. So all of us have those experiences. Myself, more than maybe some of you. So stick to your role as a parent. They don't need a friend at this time. They need a parent. And that's something you need to remember all the way through their lives. They always need a parent. They can find many friends, but they only have one parent or guardian. I know today's society, there may be two parents or two guardians, but the sense of being a parent is there. They don't know it yet, but they need this structure. You are the best person to provide it. I'm going to be referencing a book called Building Resilience. And this book is by Dr. Ginsburg. And one of the things he mentions in there, the best thing to build resilience is kids aren't as fragile as we think or tend to think. And that doesn't mean in a physical way, but in an emotional way. And you don't want your children to get hurt physically, absolutely. But we need to allow them to fail once in a while so they can use their God-given resources to cope and learn. Example kind is riding a bike. Yes, when they're riding a bike, you don't want to just let go and let them fall over all the time. But at some point, you have to allow them to stop or fall possibly. That's an extreme example sometimes, but I think you get it. You have to let them fail at some point because if you don't, they will They will think they're incapable. And the only failing is if they quit trying. That's a difficult thing for a parent. You have to absorb some of that. And you'll be able to be a net for them for quite a while when they're little. But at some point, that net sounds like a helicopter. When you don't allow them to make mistakes, here's a big one. If you don't allow them to make mistakes in school, such as get a failing grade, you become what we titled in middle school a helicopter parent. Is it worse for them to fail a subject and learn from that failure in seventh grade? Or is it worse for them to fail a subject in high school or college and not know how to recover? So, if you wonder why your children are the way they are, this was the hardest thing for me. Look in the mirror. Most of their modeling that they get and that their brain absorbs is at the younger ages, up to about 6 years of age, and they start developing a cognitive ability. And you're it, or whoever is the adult near them. That's where it's modeled from. Reflect on what influenced them growing up. How did you act? Um, One of the things that I find is the behaviors that we've modeled for them. I would see them a lot in middle school. I could tell what kind of house they lived in by how they reacted most of the time. Children and teens act based on their parents' expectations of them. But one of the adages we hear all the time, or I used to, is sticks and stones may break your bones, but words will never hurt you. The absolute on difference in that it is reversed. The worst damage they carry through is that emotional hurt, the words. And I think we're realizing that more and more. This is probably one of the worst lies we provide for our children or tell our children or think about. And it shows in the current mental health issues around us. And we'll cover a little more in a little bit. Instead of trying to catch them doing something wrong, which is our inner reaction to anything, is we got to correct them. We have to correct them. We have to correct them, but the best way to correct them is catch them doing it right. I got that quote from, I've coached sports for over 20 some years and trained many athletes in different areas. And in that time, I always went on the mantra, catch them doing it right. If you catch them doing it right, you don't have to correct them. They will self-correct. If all they ever hear is what they're doing wrong, and we never tell them what the expectation is, they're lost. Our world tends to base their sense of an individual's worth on their achievement in sports, academics, music, movies. But listen carefully. God bases his sense of worth on Galatians 5:22 and 23. And for any of you parents that are really struggling, I would tell you on your mirror somewhere, someplace, place that scripture. What does God base us on? Love, joy, peace, long suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self control. If you want to know what you need to teach your children, that's it. They will very seldom hear from other people that statement. So, in order to model all of this for your children, the coping skills, they need to be allowed to make mistakes at times and fail. We send a really dangerous message when we overprotect them. So please trust God with them. And when you can, let them fail. All right. So we'll move it to what are kind of the three rules to being an influential parent? Now, this goes all over the place. Well, one, youngsters live up or down based on their parents' expectations. So, not what is the world expecting of them? What are you? What have you thought about what you really want your child rules to be or guidance or structure? We tend to, sorry, we tend to judge our children by their performance. And for that reason, God calls us to rather teach them to be good people. Once again, considerate, respectful, honest, fair, generous. Have we worked on this? Have we modeled these things? Um, these are the qualities that will benefit them in the future. Teach your children in the admonition of the Lord. Rules are made to keep us safe. Rules are not made to punish us. I want you to think about that in how you build your family structure. Second point, the second, a child's ability to bounce back from adversity is whether an adult believes in them unconditionally. This was one of the hardest things for me to do, to disconnect, because when I was growing up, I was in a very, very abusive home, both emotionally and physically. Um, but Dr. Ginsburg, in chapter 15 of his book, goes into great detail on how this is modeled. In summary, your love for your child when they are an infant required patience. That does not change as they grow up. You need to be patient. They need to show unconditional love, even in the most dire circumstances. This is modeled to us when you think of Christ and his situation with Judas. Judas knew exactly, or Christ knew exactly what Judas was going to do. However, he still loved him, even through the betrayal. He didn't make the choice to condemn him. Judas made his own choice. As you teach them, always remember to separate the behavior from the individual. By disapproving of the behavior, but acceptance of them, you guide them to understand unrelenting forgiveness. If you want them to get to know what God is like, show them that unrelentless forgiveness. Christ modeled that best, I think, for me, with Peter. 3 times Peter chose to deny him, 3 deliberate times, and then Peter walked away. But what was one of the first things Christ did when he came back? He pulled Peter aside. He says, Peter, do you love me? And Peter says, yes, of course I do, Lord. Feed my sheep. Once again, he asked him a second time, Peter, do you love me? He says, Lord, you know I love you. Feed my lambs. And then a third time, there's a lot of reasons for this, but on the third time, Jesus said, Peter, do you love me? And once again, Peter said, you know I do. And Christ says, then love my sheep. That is unrelenting forgiveness. You also hear in scripture, how many times should I forgive someone? 70, my neighbor, 70 times 7. Well, that's also your children and yourself. Learn that path of forgiveness. The third way as a parent guardian, I think, to teach resilience is by modeling the appropriate behavior. Okay, now I'm going to talk about me on this. I don't want to put any of you guys into a situation. We have to do this at all ages, whether we want to or not. We are always a model to our children, even when we've had a strained relationship. And most of the times in those strained relationships, it's our modeling that gives our pride, sense of pride gets in the way, and we don't make the choice we should make. Okay. When was the last time you said something out loud and suddenly realized your child was there and thought to yourself, I just blew it? Now, in pastoral families, this is key. There's a country western song, so forgive me. I really like it, but the song is entitled He's Just Like Me. If you want to know why your children are the way they are, just look at yourself. This is one of the ones as teenagers I had to do many times. There are many common examples of this. You're driving down the highway and someone cuts you off. How do you react? Oops, I shouldn't have said that. Or you make a comment about the sermon and you weren't preaching that day and it wasn't a good comment. Or here's one I was really had a difficulty with using sarcasm. In my house, that was a sense of humor. And if you were sarcastic to other people, and I simply learned or shortly learned in the ministry, it isn't appropriate. Now, my coworkers, uh, you ask them, am I sarcastic? Yeah, but I do my best not to be in a hurting way. And don't discipline your child while you're angry. I know that seems like the golden rule, but that's one of the hardest ones. I encourage you to change your soundtracks. These are deep embedded thoughts, automatic. It's an automatic statement you may make. Someone says, how are you doing? Oh, I'm doing great, but you're not. That's a very simple one. But we have embedded responses based on our modeling and how we were raised and the people we associate with. Let God check them out for you and see if it's truthful, is it helpful, and is it healthy? That's how you evaluate your thought pattern. It's a very simple way. And once again, catch them doing it right. They have a much better chance of being resilient if they know what is correct, not just what is wrong. Um, all right. So that's a whole lot. Now we're going to get into basically Ginsburg's sense of seven C's. These are his thoughts. And in the book reference that I know Chrissy will get to you, this is one of his guides. And understand that there's not a time frame on using these. The number one thing to help your children be um, resilient is competence. So what does that kind of encompass? The ability to know how to handle situations effectively. The feeling that I can do this is required through actual experience. Children can't become confident without practical experience and developing the skills needed to trust their own judgment, make responsible choices, and face difficult situations. Some things you can think about to build confidence. Do I help my child focus on their strengths and build on them? Do I notice what they do right or focus on the wrong? Do I allow them to try and fail or make safe mistakes so they have an opportunity to right themselves? Do I communicate with them in a way that empowers my child to make their own decisions? Or do I undermine their sense of competence by lecturing or giving them information beyond their ability to grasp? Remember, you're older than them. Your life experiences are different than them. The way they're experiencing life today is quite different than the way you have experienced life, and extremely different from the way I experienced life in my generation. And as I try to protect them, does my interference mistakenly send them the message, I don't think you can handle this. So you as a parent have to do it. Be careful of that one because they don't build confidence if they don't think they can do it. Next is confidence. Nice segue. True confidence is the solid belief in one's own abilities and is rooted in competence. That's appropriate. Confidence is not the warm, fuzzy self-esteem that supposedly results from always telling them how special they are. I use that term and I don't mean to offend anyone. Yes, your children are extremely special, but I think you understand um, I hope you do understand what Dr. Ginsburg was talking about in that if they're just mediocre and there are things that they really should have done better, help them do that. Appreciate where they are, but don't keep telling them how special they are if there's something more you expect out of them, because then they get confused. Competent children know they are safe and protected and develop a deep-seated sense of security that boosts their confidence to face and cope with life's challenges. Being honest with your child and their abilities goes a long way to building self-confidence. It's a lot easier when they're young to catch them, to help them understand, could you have done better? You did a great job, but did you? Here's my quote to my soccer players. If you left it all on the pitch, then you should be proud. If you didn't, then talk to yourself about what you need to do better. Very simple. I'm not condemning them. If they've done their best, then really support them. And I found that go a long way with self-esteem, especially on some of my players. Some things that will help build that self-confidence is, do I clearly express that I expect the best, what I just said? And let me back up a bit. And what I mean in the best, like I'll use the soccer example again, is not are they the best player, not are they better than everybody out there, but did they do what is best for them? And not necessarily in how they played, but in their personal qualities, fairness, integrity, persistence, and kindness. Did they represent those or model those on the pitch? I was amazed that when I focused on that and let them know that, what a difference it made in several of my teams. Do I catch them being good when they are generous, helpful, kind, or when they do something without being asked? Very simple. Do you catch them doing good and let them know? It's kind of a continuing theme you'll see in this, catching them doing something right. That's an overwhelming theme in your child's life. Do I encourage them to strive a little bit harder because I believe they can succeed? See, that's that, if they're doing their best and you know it, then great. But if you think they can do better and you think they know that, then encourage them. Do I avoid instilling shame in my child? Do I call them out in public or do I suck it up and wait till we get home? But do I praise in public? That's key. That builds their sense of confidence and helps them in self-esteem. The next one is building a connection. Number three, children whose close ties to family, friends, school, and community are more likely to have a sense of security, strong values, and prevents them from seeking destructive alternatives. It almost pretty much sounds like common sense. So in today's society, how do we handle that? Today, some of the greatest threats to these connections are family mobility due to social economics issues, changing jobs, those kind of things. And alongside of that, but I'm actually going to say number two, because we're blaming this way too much as parents, because we have total control over this if we do it. Social media. You, as a parent, and it's going to be difficult, can control that. There are so many methods out there that you can use, but I'm not going to go into those. But I want you to think about that. You, as a parent, have a choice of how much social media they get involved in. And at a critical point, you may have to handle that. And we'll talk a little bit later the difference between being a parent and being a friend, just briefly. Okay. The research currently shows, and this was a while back, I think it's much higher than that now. Each teenager spends 4 to 6 hours a day on some form of social media. I want to ask you a question. As an adult, as a parent, how much time do you model on social media? Do you guys sit around the dinner table with your phones and your computers on? Do you have a Wi-Fi off time where nobody can get onto it, right? These are choices. And yes, this is a hard teaching at this point, and I've had to wrestle with it myself. But these are the things you have to start thinking about as the influences on your children change. When considering how to stay connected with your with your kids and your family in this society, do we build a sense of physical safety and emotional security within our home? In other words, when your kids or children come home, even as adults, do they feel safe? Do they feel respected? Do they feel secure? Or do they come into a house of conflict? Do we do everything we can to address conflict within our family and work to resolve problems rather than letting them fester? Hmm. One of the things as a husband and spouse you learn early, the adage, don't go to bed angry. Boy, you go to bed angry, and that is a truism. The spiritual battles that occur in your mind when you're asleep are very, very dangerous. And I just want to encourage you that your reflection of someone else is to separate them from their behavior and still love them is realize your real enemy is not them. Your enemy is a power of evil behind them. So hang on. Do we have a television, computer, entertainment center in every room? Enough said. Yeah, we kind of do. If they have a smartphone, they don't have it just in every room. They have it in every moment of their lives. And so do we. Okay. Do your kids each have their own smartphone and unlimited access to the internet? See, these are things you have to choose, and I know they're not easy. Do I jealously guard my child from developing close relationships with others? Or do I foster healthy relationships with those people who share healthy and positive messages, no matter their ethnic background? Christ calls us to have strong mentors and models. Three are better than one. And you can help them choose their mentors. You can introduce them to these people that can breathe life into your children. And here's one. For men, hang on, I know this may sound difficult, and it was for me. My personality didn't show this. Does my child know that I am absolutely crazy in love with them? All right. I'll leave that one alone because everybody's personality is a little different. Next one is building character. All of this is building on itself. We're almost done. Hang in there. Children need a fundamental sense of right from wrong to ensure they are prepared to make wise choices, contribute to the world, and become stable adults. Some basic questions you can ask yourself. Do I help my children understand how their behaviors affect other people in both negative and positive ways? Stress the positive. Do I allow them to clarify their own values? This is one of the things in the teen years, and I think Krissie will agree with me. Most of teenagers just want to be heard. They don't want to be told. They just want to be heard. And then by hearing them, you can help them evaluate their own values. Do I let them consider right from wrong and look beyond the immediate satisfaction and selfish needs? Yeah, there's almost too many examples to even talk about. Do I demonstrate the importance of community, whatever that looks like? Community has changed over the years, but do you value and demonstrate the importance of community? Do you get together with other people intentionally? Do I help them develop a sense of spirituality? Spirituality. Well, we all have some form of spirituality. What is yours? In other words, even those that will say they don't believe in God, they believe in something. There's very few true agnostics out there. Okay. Uh, God has a sense in each and every one of us. Recognize yours as an adult. And how do you share that with your kids? Am I careful to avoid racist and hateful statements? Um, my generation is probably one of the worst at that, simply because racism was very, very subtle. It wasn't an open refusal with people, but it was very subtle. I was fortunate. I grew up in an extremely multicultural community. I was even more fortunate. The middle school I worked in for 17 years in Alaska was one of the top five most um, diverse, both socially and economically, and it gave me an insight into a world that I thought I knew, but I heard it from a different direction. So, in doing that, how do they contribute? Children realize that the world is a better place because they are in it. Serving others is one of the best ways, and God has asked us to do that for a reason, to encourage and give your children self-worth. Contribution is showing generosity with your time, money, and resources. He that cares for the least of these cares for me. Um, I did not come to serve, or be served, but to serve. Do I make it clear to my child that this is critical and they can improve the world? And do I create opportunities for them to do that? They're not necessarily going to do that on their own. And a lot of times in the church, we tend to rely on our youth pastor, or we tend to rely on someone else, a volunteer that puts together mission trips and those things. Yes, that's great. That's who you want them connected with. But what do you personally do to create opportunities for your child? Coping. Children who learn to cope effectively with stress are better prepared to overcome life's challenges. Um, for pastoral families, that glass house is a very difficult place to live. So when you are in your private family, do you model the positive coping skills on a consistent basis like you do in front of your congregation? Sometimes what happens, and I'm gonna say about myself, I'm so busy holding a facade and almost not a false me, but I don't let people in. As pastors, we have to be very careful about who we let in. Um, but at home, I need to let them in. And am I so tired at the end of the day preaching and serving the congregation, I have nothing left for my family? Okay. Do I believe telling them to just stop the negative behaviors? Or will it do any good? Doing the same thing and over again? Yeah, definition of insanity. All right. And the last one is control. Um, and this is what I'll end on. When children realize, okay, sorry, let's see, did I skip? No. The last one that covers control. When children realize they can control the outcomes for their decisions and actions, they're much more likely to know they have the ability to do what it takes to bounce back. That's resiliency. One of the things the other areas show them is it helps them develop their cognitive choice making and decisions. The cognitive portion of the brain in a child is the last to develop. Guess when it really starts to develop? Middle school age. And that's when all of these things they have to start making choices on. Okay, so children tend to see control as externally being told, being bossed around by an adult. Whatever they do really doesn't matter because they have no control. But a resilient child knows that they have the ability to internally control their reactions and, as such, their choices and actions. Here are some very difficult questions about control. Do I help my child understand that life events are not purely random and most things happen as a direct result of someone's choices or actions? Now, yeah, I'm going to leave it at that because the rest can get into a theological battle. On the other hand, do I let my child understand they aren't always responsible? Many of the bad circumstances in their life are not their fault. However, they can choose how they react to every situation. Do they trust in God's deliverance and support and courage? Or do they choose to be angry and self-seeking in those choices? That's where you as parents help them as they're younger to get into that. Do I help them recognize even small successes so they can experience a feeling and knowledge they can succeed? Okay, that's a whole lot in a short time. To get the details, there is a book that people have think, well, well, no, I'll get into that later. I'm going to invite Krissie back. Krissie, it's all yours.
No, thank you so much. I was over here here, I'll change the screen. I was over here taking notes because as a parent, and my kids
Mhm.
are only 7, but as a 7-year-old, I can use these tools myself for my own kids. So I'm over here just taking notes, and I know this will be so beneficial to so many families. And I had sent, for those of you watching this, I had sent Dan a few questions ahead of time, but I think you answered most of my questions. And I'm going to invite parents who may have questions to email you at dan@careforpastors.org. And
Mhm.
I think it's okay to say that you're welcoming any additional
Yeah.
questions. Okay.
Yes,
Awesome. And
absolutely.
I may have some moving forward, but something that really I wanted to address is for parents like me. Um, what what would you tell what would you tell parents who might feel overwhelmed when taking these tools and actually applying them? If they feel, oh, I can't do this, I don't know where to start. What would you tell those parents?
Um, don't get down on yourself. When you think about it, I know like for my family was extremely, anyways, not a health, what you would call functional family. Mm-mm. Um, and I didn't know how to be a parent. I did, and I didn't know how to be a kid's parent, a toddler's parent, a teenage parent, a young adult parent, and a grandparent parent. But God has great directions for us. The healthiest thing you can do is surround yourself with other families of the same age group and go to, if you can't, go to old people like me. I mean, I'm almost 70 years old now, and I'm learning every day how to work with people. One of the things I do, though, is I stay very connected with families. That's pretty much my specialty is working with families. The other thing is there's a lot of resources out there. I mean, I got a whole bookshelf full of them. But to start, after 40 some years of doing this, the absolutely best one-shop book is A Parent's Guide to Building Resilience in Children and Teens. Now, um, Dr. Ginsburg was a medical doctor. He has his master's in education. He's also a member of the National Family Association of Pediatrics, and he's a Christian. And when you read this book, and it carries you through wherever you're at in your life with your kids, um, and carrying these 7 C's, he'll break these 7 C's down much better than I did. But you can start that book at any age. Okay, so you didn't know what to do when they were 7 and 8. That's okay. There's still plenty of time. Um, but having the guidance of understanding the spiritual strength of God's Holy Spirit, I don't want to get into theology, but I'm going to tell you, as a counselor all these years, if you don't have a solid spiritual foundation, you're going to continue to struggle. So seek that first.
Good.
Look at yourself. Where are you at? Um, Peter Scazzaro, right? Did I
Mhm.
get his word? He has two really fantastic books out there, one for women and one for men, dealing with emotional, spiritual health. And it's focusing on you. Before I got to work for Care for Pastors, First thing Ron Cook handed me was, I said, Ron, if there's one book you would recommend, and he, as I was at, he turns around, he grabs it off his shelf, he says, this is it. I said, well, this guy's got a lot of experience, and I read it, and it literally changed my life. And when I first read that, I was like 68.
And that was
But
emotionally healthy spirituality, right? That book.
yeah. And I mean, men and women can read it, but it's a game changer. That's where I'd say start.
That's good.
Love God, love your kids. Yeah.
No, and you had said something, I wrote it down. The best way to help build resilience is that they know what is correct and not just what is wrong. And that's something I'm going to really be practicing. I think that's a discipline, is to ask God, help me see what they are doing right, and to remind me to tell them what they're doing right. Because I think it's so obvious when we see what they're doing wrong. And I'm definitely going to be implementing that in the days ahead, because I thought that was really something good that you said that I can practically
It's
do.
interesting in coaching. I always believed that in coaching, and I coached for, like I said, about 20 some years. And the parallels between that and raising kids is phenomenal, because not only was I a coach, I was also a parent of two very good athletes. And so you have to be able to separate as a coach and as their child. And I would always ask them, okay, do you want to know as a coach or as a parent? So you have to recognize what is your role in what's going on at that point. So that is one of those coaching. I would always hear, and any parents out there, okay, if you get offended by this, too bad, too sad. In soccer, what happens is you got great supportive parents, but the whole time they're screaming at their kids, kick it, kick it, kick it. Don't kick it, kick it. That's what you hear. They can't pay attention to what they're doing. And the worst model for that is the coaches. If you have a coach, I want to encourage you, if you have a coach screaming at your kids all the time when they're playing the game, you need to evaluate, is that healthy for your child? If you have a coach that uses their coaching time, and this is parallel this to parents, I'm not blaming, okay? This is parents, and teaches them during their practice what they're supposed to do. And then when they're playing the game, sits there and watches them. Doesn't scream directions. Now, every once in a while they have to. Maybe they're way out of position. You got to make it quick. But every once in a while, it's not bad. What my athletes would tell me is, Coach, every time you're yelling, we're listening to you. We're not thinking about what we're doing. Okay. That was my cue to say, oh, shut up, Dan. And then I watched one video, they taped my game, and you know what they heard the whole game?
What?
Me. Blah, 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 blah. I said, oh, that embarrassed me. I saw that. I said, okay, time to change. Teach them doing it right. Teach them right in the house, and then support them in public. If they did it wrong, deal with that in the home. If they did it right, deal with that in public. So, yeah, boy, I tell you, when I did this, when I took a look at this, Krissie, I said, "Oh, this is gonna hurt," because I was once again looking at, "Oh, yeah, that's me," kind of thing. So,
no, and that's what I love about team at Care for Pastors, is we're very real. Like, we don't teach anything we're not learning, and we're learning, right? And so, Dan, thank you so much just for sharing your wisdom, your expertise on this. And again, if you're watching, you have questions, Dan at careforpastors.org. And this will be posted on our social media. So feel free to comment and have discussions with other parents. We are not alone in this, right? And that's important.
And that's the best, probably that's the best place to get questions answered, okay, is in a setting with other parents, because what works for you may not work for others. However, at least they know there's more choices out there than just what they're thinking. So, yeah, I hope they do join that forum. That's awesome.
All right. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and sign out. And thank you guys for joining.